In 2024, I ranked Arc, Vivaldi, and Firefox as my favorite browsers. 18 months later, Arc is essentially in maintenance mode. Mozilla almost burned the Firefox brand to the ground, and two browsers I couldn't even include back then are now in the top 3. Here is the 2026 update. Here's what I'm judging these browsers on. Speed, privacy, and I mean actual privacy, not the marketing privacy, and the features also that actually change how you use the web every day. It's something that's super important because obviously you're using this thing every day and it should work well. Then how well it plays with your phone and obviously with your other devices. And finally, whether just normal websites are working like they're supposed to, because nothing is more annoying than fighting your browser to read a recipe, right? I mean, I already have to fight the websites to get to the actual recipe anyway. I don't need like another hurdle in the way, right? By the end of this video, you'll know essentially 3 things. Which browser uses 25% less RAM than Chrome, and which browser uses essentially more than double. What Mozilla did to burn their brand to the ground is also something that I talk about in this video. Super interesting. And also which browser the browser company doesn't want you to switch to after they essentially killed Arc. You want to stick around to the end of this one because that's essentially when I'll break down the performance of each browser side by side. So let's get into this video. Before I get to the picks, let me tell you what is not on the list and why exactly. I mean, everybody is probably using Chrome, and if you're watching this video, you probably want to switch from Chrome to some other more secure browser, right? And this is why Chrome here in this video is on the top of the avoid list because, well, the data harvesting of Chrome is essentially the business model, right? You are not the customer of Chrome, you are essentially the inventory. Every mouse click you do, every search you do, how you use the tabs, how you open the browser, everything is tracked and is funneled back into Chrome. You already know this, and that's why you're watching this video. Meanwhile, if you look in the Microsoft ecosystem, Edge, in my opinion, is much better, right? It's just Chrome with Bing welded into every surface and Copilot ads inside the browser itself. So now Microsoft essentially puts ads in the software you're basically forced to install already on Windows. Great, right? What could go wrong? And Opera? Well, most people don't know it was acquired in 2016 by a Chinese consortium led by a company called Kunlun Tech, right? And then the heavily marketed Opera GX VPN, well, it's not actually VPN. It's basically just a proxy that hides your IP from the websites you visit, but not from anyone else like your internet service provider. And then if you are in the Mac ecosystem, there's obviously Safari, right? It's a fine browser. It's fairly secure if you're living inside the Apple ecosystem, but it's a little painful the moment you step outside of the Apple ecosystem, right? Now, I also want to mention the new wave of AI browsers because the marketing obviously has been impossible to escape. I mean, AI in general, but browsers in particular, right? There's Comet from Perplexity. We got Atlas from OpenAI. We got Dia from the browser company. The pitch in these browsers is essentially the same in all 3, right? You got the AI assistant that's baked into the browser that essentially reads every page you load, so it can conveniently summarize, fetch, and even act on your behalf, right? That sounds great, but here's the part that the marketing essentially leaves out. To do all of these great actions, the assistant has to see literally everything that you do, has to read every page, every form, every password field, and yeah, eventually, if you give it the information, every banking session and credit card information, right? So there are researchers at the UC Davis and a few European universities. They ran a real study on this in 2025, and they tested AI assistants built into browsers like Copilot and Merlin, and they found those assistants kept collecting page content and identifying info even when private browsing was turned on. Like, private browsing is supposed to be the mode where they stop collecting data. Unfortunately, they didn't. On top of that, there's DS data retention policy, which has changed twice in the last 6 months, which essentially tells you nobody at the browser company, and they have not really figured out what they actually want to do with your data yet, right? AI browsers, I think they will be a real category eventually, especially as AI is improving and as we're getting into 2027, right? Right now, I mean, they leak. They keep moving the goalposts on what they do with your data, and the private browsing mode they'd rely on to like limit the damage, well, it isn't actually that private. So in my opinion, for most people, you should truly skip these browsers for now. I know we want to get into the ranking of this video, so that was a little bit of ramble before we start. Here is the first pick. This is the one essentially I'm putting on my mom's laptop, on my grandma's laptop, on anybody who doesn't really want to deal with the details, right? And that is Brave. And Brave is essentially the closest thing to an install and forget Chrome replacement that actually exists, right? You download it, the ads are gone, most of the trackers or all the trackers are gone, and you didn't even have to read anything or agree to anything to get there, right? Let me show you like what's actually doing that specific work. And here it's called Shields, right? Click the little orange lion icon right here next to the address bar. See this panel that pops right up? And that's Brave's anti-tracking engine. And by default, Shields does three things. It blocks cross-site trackers, which are the scripts that follow you from website to website, essentially. Usually, they want to build an advertising profile. It blocks fingerprinting, which is, super useful. The fingerprinting is essentially sneakier scripts that measure your screen size, your installed fonts, your time zone, and it blocks ads at the network level, which means the ads never even load. And that's how Brave hits roughly half the page weight of Chrome on the same sites. Sometimes Shields break a site. Usually when a bank login hits the shield or some other video service that's using a tracker for fraud detection, that sometimes can be frustrating. Now, don't worry, it's actually quite easy to fix. Let me show you how. Just open the Shields panel again and you turn it off for that one particular site. Now, refresh. And essentially, you're in. Everywhere else, Shields stays on, and this literally takes, 4 seconds. Now, in the second feature, and this is one a lot of the people miss because it's a little bit tucked into the menu, is Tor Windows. And here's how to get to it. Click the menu button up here, and then New Private Window with Tor. Now, this looks like a regular incognito window, right? But it's actually routing your traffic through the Tor network. See here? You can see it setting up my Tor connection, and bam, I'm already connected through Tor. I mean, I could do probably a whole video on how Tor works. Here's the quick version. When you visit a website over Tor, your connection bounces through several encrypted nodes before it reaches the destination. Each node only knows the one right before it and the one right after. So by the time you arrive at the website, your real IP address is completely masked. Sounds actually pretty great, right? Well, yes and no. There are some serious, real concerns and drawbacks about how and who actually runs and operates these Tor nodes. It's a little too much to get into this video, but the short version, if all you want is to hide your IP address, you're better off with a trustworthy VPN that I'm going to leave you some of them that I like in the description box below. But what is cool about Brave's Tor window is that they let you open deep web URLs that most browsers can't really reach. You don't have to install a separate Tor browser. It's essentially right there at your fingertips in the file menu. Now, I owe you the honest version of Brave's history because, it has one. Brandon Ike, who founded Brave, donated $1,000 in 2008 to a California ballot measure called Proposition 8, which bans same-sex marriage in that state. Now, when that donation came out in 2014, Ike had to leave Mozilla over it, and he's never publicly walked it back. And if that's a deal breaker for you, well, fair enough. You have to skip ahead to Helium. But I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, hey, Mauricio, I don't care about political positions the founder made almost 2 decades ago, right? I'm just looking for a browser. Well, in 2020, Brave got caught doing something else. The browser was secretly adding affiliate codes to crypto exchange URLs. So if you typed in, for example, Binance.com into the address bar, Brave was quietly appending its own referral tag to earn a commission. They patched it the same week and apologized, obviously, but it was a real breach of trust. And on Windows, the Brave installer has historically tried to install Brave's own VPN in the background as a background Windows service, even when you've never asked for a VPN. That part bothers me more than the rest, to be honest, because installing background services without an explicit opt-in is exactly the kind of behavior we yell at antivirus companies for, essentially, right? I'm looking at you, McAfee, here. One more thing on Brave that I covered in my last video was that Brave has essentially its own ad system called Brave Ads. They're opt-in, they're fortunately off by default, and when they're off, you never see one. If you do turn them on, Brave pays you in its own cryptocurrency called BAT, which stands for Basic Attention Token. Now, you can earn a small amount, usually like a few dollars a month at most, for each privacy-respecting ad you see. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme here, but it's not a scam either. I've seen a lot of reviewers conflate this with Brave being some kind of crypto browser, but don't confuse it. It really isn't unless you flip the switch and see those ads. Now, before we get to my next pick, I want to ask a favor. If this comparison is useful so far, a quick like helps keep making these videos, and subscribe too if you haven't already. And now we can already get back to the video because we want to know what is the number 2 pick, right? Pick number 2 is Helium. And this is the one that essentially surprised me the most. Helium is for you if you actually like the Chrome interface, you don't want to learn a new browser, but also don't want Chrome itself watching everything you do. Helium is what Brave is essentially trying to be without the BAT rewards, essentially, without the VPN trying to install itself as a service, and without the let's say, political baggage, right? Just a Chromium with Google ripped out of it. So Helium is built on a project called Ungoogled Chromium, which is exactly what it sounds like. The open source Chromium code with every Google service and every callback to Google's servers just yanked right out of it, right? Then the Helium team layers more on top of this. uBlock Origin is already pre-installed with the right filter lists already loaded. All third-party cookies are blocked by default. Fingerprint resistance is on. There is no telemetry anywhere in the browser, which means nothing about how you use it gets sent back to anyone. Now, the feature I want to show you that no other browser in this video does is what happens the first time you open it. Now, watch this. Open Chrome on a brand new machine, right? Before you've visited a single website, Chrome has already sent dozens of requests out to Google, right? Update checks, telemetry, search prefetches, sign-in checks. Open Firefox, pretty much the same idea, right? Just to Mozilla instead of to Google. Now, if we open Helium, for the first time, the network panel is pretty much empty. We see literally zero requests. The browser does not call home until you actually browse to a website. Why does this matter, right? Because every other browser has already identified you by hardware, by IP address, and location before you've consented to essentially anything. They've already sent your machine's fingerprint somewhere. And Helium is the only one in this lineup that gives you a truly blank network footprint right out of the gate. Now, we gotta be honest here. The catch is real. Helium is still in beta as of May 2026. All 3 desktop platforms are supported, but expect a rough edge here and there when you're actually using it. There's no official mobile app, and there's no built-in sync to share bookmarks and passwords across devices. That said, if all you want is Chrome, but without Google's shady practices, I think Helium is the answer for you. Now onto Firefox. Firefox is the old school pick, right? And the reason Firefox is still in this video at all in 2026 is honestly half a value statement and half a technical one. Mozilla's Gecko engine is the closest thing the web has to, I would say, non-corporate alternative to the Chromium engine. Without Firefox, it's just Google powering pretty much every web browser out there. I don't know about what you think about it, but I think this matters truly for the independent web, like it matters a lot. Now, for the technical half of the things, let me show you actually the coolest feature that Firefox has that nothing else in this lineup matches, and it's called the container tabs. And here's how to enable them. You can open a fresh tab and type in about config, like so, in the address bar, and you'll get this little warning that you can ignore because obviously you're doing something very dangerous at this point. And once you've ignored that, now we have this empty settings panel. You can type in privacy user context like this, and you'll see some settings pop up. And this one right here is the one we're looking for. It's called UI.enabled. Set it to true by clicking this little button over here with the 2 arrows. And now we can actually turn the containers on. So click the menu up here and choose settings. Scroll down to the section that says tabs and find this setting here, enable container tabs, like so. If I click on settings below, I can choose what to call the containers, but I'll stick with the defaults for now. So now that this is enabled, I can then right-click the new tab button I can choose a container from the list, and the tab that opens is completely walled off from my other tabs. I run my work Gmail, for example, in one container, and my personal Gmail in another. It's in the same window. It's the same browser, no logging out. There's no incognito juggling. Each container has its own cookies, its own local storage, its own login state, and nothing else gives you that. That is one of the features why I'm still using Firefox to this day. Okay. Now, the part we have to talk about. In late February 2025, Mozilla quietly updated the Firefox terms of use. They added a new clause, and the wording was, it was rough. I'm paraphrasing because the lawyers have since rewritten the sentence, but they said essentially you grant Mozilla a non-exclusive, royalty-free worldwide license to use the information you input through Firefox. Oh, yikes. That kind of language is what you find in the social media terms of service, but you wouldn't expect this in a browser. It is not what you want to find in a browser you install on your machine. The privacy community read it, screenshotted it, and the internet caught fire within 48 hours. Mozilla published a clarifying blog post the next day. The legal team rewrote the clause to explicitly limit the license to what's needed to make Firefox actually function. The corrected version rolled out within a week. My read, the rewritten clause is actually fine. The rollback was real, and Mozilla is still probably the best counterweight we have to a Google-only web. But still, it left a bad taste in my mouth. If you're hesitating on Firefox right now because of this whole episode, it's a fair thing to be hesitant about. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, right? But there are also other browsers in this list that you might want to check out. Namely, number 4th on the list, which is Librewolf. And Librewolf is basically the same idea as Helium, but for Mozilla instead of Google, right? It's Firefox with all of Mozilla's telemetry pulled out at the build level. uBlock Origin is pre-installed with the right filter lists already loaded, and the privacy defaults are set to what the security community calls the Arkenfox profile. It's essentially a community-tuned config that's been audited for years. You don't have to discover any of it. It's just on, you install it, you enable it, and that's it, right? The thing Librewolf has that Firefox literally can't offer is a clean build. Now, Firefox has telemetry hooks you can disable in settings, and Librewolf doesn't have them at all, right? They were removed before the binary was even compiled. There's no toggle to forget, no surprise update that re-enables them, no telemetry server somewhere logging that you installed the browser, and that's a guarantee Firefox itself cannot make. Now, if you've been using Firefox for years, but don't like the direction Mozilla's been heading in, this is the browser for you. I mean, just take a look at this. Now, I pull up Firefox and Librewolf side by side, and as you can see, I mean, they look basically identical. Even the settings here are essentially the same. Look, except Librewolf strips out all the extra garbage Mozilla has decided to bundle in, like its AI controls and installers for other apps, right? But I gotta tell you, I mean, the cost is real. There is no built-in sync, so your bookmarks and passwords, they don't follow you to another machine unless you set up your own syncing solution. And Librewolf doesn't auto-update, which means you have to grab new versions manually every few weeks. And finally, it misses some of the more advanced Firefox features, like those container tabs I showed you earlier. They're not available. It's also a bit of a chore to set up and get running. I would say plan 15 to 30 minutes the first time, mostly to log into your accounts and import your bookmarks. And after that, just remember to just check regularly for updates. And if you can do that, Librewolf is probably the best privacy-focused browser you can use in 2026. Now, pick number 5 is Vivaldi. I used Vivaldi as my main browser for about 6 months in 2024 before I switched to Zen. So I've put real time into this one. Vivaldi is essentially for the person who wants to stay on Chromium, but who also wants a bit more. Right? More of what, you're asking? Well, essentially more of everything. More tab management, more sidebar widgets, more keyboard shortcuts, more themes, more built-in tools. I mean, Vivaldi is the customization king of this list, and it's the closest thing to an Arc replacement you can get on a Chromium basis. There are 2 features in Vivaldi that exist nowhere else in this lineup, and you have to see them to believe them. The first is command chains. First, you gotta open Settings, and then find Quick Commands, and then scroll down to Command Chains. And there's a couple pre-installed here, but here's one I've created from scratch called Focus Read, right? As you can see, I've added 4 sections: toggle reader view, toggle full screen, mute other tabs, and finally, capture full page screenshot. I assign it Control-Shift-R, And now anytime I'm on an article worth reading, one keystroke flips the browser into a single page reader mode and silences every other tab, so nothing pings me mid-paragraph. It even quietly saves a screenshot of the article, so I have my own copy of the site if it ever goes down or gets eventually paywalled later. So no other browser in this video lets you wire up something like this. The possibilities with this automations are basically endless, right? And the second standout feature is web panels. It's right over here in the strip on the left side of the screen. And check this out. I can pin basically any website here. Let's just do Wikipedia as an example. I click this plus button and type in wikipedia.org. Now, I can always open Wikipedia here without closing or leaving my main tab. And I find this especially useful for things like Telegram or Google Calendar, so I don't have to switch out from what I'm currently looking at just to like send a message or check my schedule or add a new appointment, right? There's a lot more in Vivaldi that I'm not going to walk you through here, right? But there's, for example, tab stacks, a built-in mail and calendar application, vertical tabs, beautiful, right? Custom themes, I mean, a built-in screenshot tool, everything's in the comparison chart linked in the description box below. But if you want a full tutorial on how to make the most of Vivaldi, drop a comment below to let me know, because then I'll sit down and I'll make one for you. The other thing worth knowing about Vivaldi is that the company is employee-owned out of Norway. So there's no venture capital chasing a quick exit, no data sale incentive baked into the corporate structure. That's a small fact, I would say, but it's a massive green flag in my book. The price you pay for all this customization is RAM. Vivaldi is the heaviest of the Chromium browsers in this lineup. There is a real cost to bundling a mail client, a calendar, web panels, and command chains into the browser process, and I'll show you exactly how much heavier the performance is in the comparison coming up in this video. And drum roll, the top pick, the one I'm using as my main browser in 2026 is Zen browser. Zen is a free open source browser built on Firefox by a community of developers, primarily in Spain and the EU, and it's been the fastest growing browser of the last 12 months for a reason. I think it has over 40,000 stars on GitHub where you can download it. I do want to show you Zen, and let me show you what it actually does. Now, the first cool feature actually about Zen is workspaces. Now, the sidebar on the left of every Zen window can hold separate workspaces, and each one has its own pinned tabs, its own like color theme, right? It's actually beautiful because you can choose it, and also its own sessions. I've got essentially 3 going. The standard like work, personal, and something called deep focus, if I just want to read something or learn something, right? The keyboard shortcut to switch is Control-Alt, right? And then your left or right arrow key, which is super easy to handle. So when you switch, the entire browser, it essentially repaints into the workspace color that you've assigned it. The new theme color, new pin tabs, the open tabs from the previous workspace, they disappear from view, but they stay alive in the background. And it's the cleanest way that I've seen to manage context switching on a single machine. Now, the second feature is called split tabs. So click 2 tabs in the sidebar like this, and then hit Alt-Control-H, and then Zen puts them side by side in the same window without spawning a second one. So endless possibilities here, right? Researching while writing, or watching a tutorial while following in on another tab, writing something and going on Reddit at the same time, right? So there's, endless possibilities. There's no third-party extension required for this. For the Zen browser, I do owe you a quick callback to the ARC refugees here, right? Because Zen is what most of you should be migrating to, in my opinion, as of 2026. ARC's spaces map onto Zen's workspaces beautifully. ARC's split view is Zen's split tabs, right? But basically every ARC feature has a one-to-one match in Zen. Now, I owe you the honest version of Zen 2 because the privacy story is more complicated than the marketing makes it sound. And Zen's privacy page leads with 3 sentences. We don't sell your data, we don't collect your data, and we don't track you. Section 1.1 of the privacy policy goes even further. It claims all telemetry and crash reporting has been fully removed. That's pretty unambiguous, right? Now, scroll down to section 9 of that same privacy policy. And there you find this, and I'm paraphrasing here. We try to disable all telemetry collection in Zen, but we may have missed something, right? It's the same document. Both statements are official, so I tested it. I put on the fresh install. I had on my Mac Little Snitch running in the background. I opened Zen for the first time and logged every outbound connection. On the first launch, before I'd even typed in the URL, Zen reached out to Mozilla's location service, Mozilla's settings service, push service, update service, and Mozilla's telemetry endpoint. There's no consent dialog. There was no app opt-in for this. And that's not theoretical. It's a packet capture on my own machine. A user actually documented the same thing in a GitHub issue 5947 back in March 2025 with DNS captures, right? The issue was then suddenly closed the same day, but the discussion eventually got locked because it was too heated, I would say. But the findings were never publicly refuted. And the way a project handles that kind of report tells you almost as much as the report itself. For a little bit of context, Privacy Guides, which is the most respected independent privacy resource in this space probably, debated whether to add Zen to the list for about 60 months and pretty much ended up rejecting it. So, does all this dethrone Zen for me? No. The experience is still the best in the lineup, and that's why it's my top pick, because in my everyday life, I don't need more complications. I just want something to work, and Zen does this pretty well. But if Zen has no telemetry is the reason you were switching, well, that's not the case. And that's not what's happening on the first launch when you install Zen. I mean, you can harden it after install. And if there's enough interest in a video for this, leave a comment below and I'll do a hardening video of Zen walking you through every switch I'd flip on myself. And here is the surprise also I teased at the start. When I tested Zen against the other 6 browsers in this lineup, Zen was not the lightest. Despite what some people will tell you online, I'll get into the actual numbers and who actually did win on resources in just a second. A couple things that are important to know before you switch. Zen has also no mobile app yet. So if you live on your mobile phone, the mobile half of your setup has to be, I would say, Firefox Mobile, which syncs nicely with Zen because they share the same underlying engine, right? The Gecko engine still occasionally fails on sites that only target Chrome, which mostly happens with niche enterprise tools, like not mainstream sites. And Zen has been less stable than Firefox for me in long-running sessions. If you leave it open for days at a time and it really starts to feel a little bit slow, just, restart it. The ranking overall still stands. So I'd rather use a Firefox-based browser I love using than a frozen, abandoned Chromium one. All right, here is the kicker, the performance. Results were honestly not what I expected, and here's what I found. I tested all 7 browsers on the same machine, Windows 11, 16 gigabytes of system RAM, same 6 tabs in each, a YouTube video page, Notion, The Verge, X, Google, and Wikipedia. Fresh profiles for everyone, no extensions, no sync, so the numbers reflect the browser itself and not really my personal setup. I'll let each browser settle, which just means waiting until its RAM usage essentially stops climbing, and then I measured for a full minute. And I ran the whole thing 5 times to just make sure all the numbers held up. Look at these RAM numbers. Sorted lightest to heaviest, we have Librewolf, 667 megabytes, then Brave, 796 megabytes, Chrome, 813 megabytes, Helium, 865 megabytes, and Vivaldi, 1,118 megabytes. And that's the bundled mail and calendar tags I told you about earlier. And Firefox, 1,588 megabytes. And Zen, the browser I just told you I'm using as my main browser in 2026, used 1,700 megabytes. And that's more than twice what Chrome used on the same 6 tabs. Yeah. Twice the RAM. I did not expect that going into this comparison. The honest explanation is that Zen's workspace system and split tabs, they obviously cost memory that Chromium just doesn't spend. Every workspace is keeping its tabs alive in the background, even the ones that you aren't really actively looking at. Every split tab is a second full browser view rendering in parallel, and that's essentially the trade-off that you have to live with, right? You get a browser that's way better to live in, but there's always a trade-off, and this trade-off you pay for in RAM. But RAM is only half the story. CPU tells also a different one. And look at this. Most of these browsers set between 5 and 7% CPU on my machine during testing. Chrome, 5.3%, Zen, 5.2%, Brave, 5.7. The outlier is Firefox at 17%, more than double Librewolf, which is the same Firefox engine, but with Mozilla's services completely stripped out, and about 3 times what Chrome itself used. Now, for your laptop, this matters more than the RAM gap. RAM only becomes a problem when you run out of it. CPU maps directly to battery drain and fan noise every minute the browser is open. Now, a browser running at 17% CPU all day burns through your battery faster than one running at 5, obviously. So if you spend serious time in the browser on a laptop, you're traveling a lot for work, for pleasure, whatever, this is the true number that matters because it'll reduce the time you can be up and running. If you want the lightest browser overall on resources, Librewolf is your pick. It's 25% lighter than Chrome on RAM, and as you just saw, it's the gentlest to your CPU of any Gecko browser I tested. And in my book, Librewolf is also the call for anyone setting up a browser on, maybe on an older machine. And honestly, I'm not going to pretend Zen is winning the resource fight. It truly isn't. What Zen is winning is the experience. It's just beautiful. The browser you actually want to open every morning. So if your machine has 16 gigabytes of RAM, 1 extra gigabyte roll isn't what's going to bottleneck you, right? But if you're on 8 gigabytes, with a heavy tab habit, take this seriously. Librewolf, Brave, or Helium will give you a noticeably smoother experience overall. Now, there's obviously a lot to these browsers that I just don't have the time to cover in one single video like this. If you want to see all 6 of these side by side, I built a comparison chart for this video. It covers the engine each browser is built on, where the team behind it is based, essentially, the tracker blocking and fingerprinting resistance defaults, synchronization, mobile apps, and the killer feature for each one. The full charts is in the description box below, so you can check that out if you want. And if you want to have this full comparison as a PDF printout, you can just download it and then make your pick. So who should pick what? Now, if you're a casual user or you're installing a browser for a less technical family member, I think go with Brave. Install it, walk away, and it just works, right? That's the whole pitch. If you love the Chrome interface and don't want to learn anything new, but you also don't want Google's tracking, then Helium's probably your guy. And if you care about not handing Google the entire web, or you're a long-term Mozilla supporter, stick with Firefox. I mean, if you're a privacy-first person who's willing to put in 15 or 13 minutes to set up at once, you can either stay with Mozilla and harden it sufficiently, or you go with Librewolf. Now, if you want to customize every pixel of your browser and stay on Chromium for extensions, then definitely Vivaldi is the way to go. And if you used to be on Arc, or you just want the smoothest browser of the bunch, I really recommend Zen. On mobile, because I know this is the next question, Zen has no mobile app. So pair Zen on the desktop with Firefox Mobile and use Firefox Sync to share bookmarks and passwords with desktop and mobile. Librewolf is in the same situation, no mobile app, paired with Firefox Mobile or even Brave Mobile. And Brave and Vivaldi both have full mobile apps on iOS and Android, so you can run the same browser on both ends. So I know it's been a long video, so thank you for sticking with me. Zen is what I'm using. Tell me why I'm wrong. Drop a comment with which browser you're on, basically, and what you switched from, and of course why. I read the comments, and the next browser video is going to be shaped by what you put down there. Now, if this was useful and helpful, hit subscribe so you catch the next update to this ranking. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.